All right, I am live with Milena Regos. Milena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Andy. Let's do this. This is
Yeah, thanks
exciting.
for reaching out. I'm glad we're going to do this interview. So, Milena, you are the founder of the Unhustle Movement, a rebel entrepreneur, ex-award-winning marketer, all this amazing stuff, speaking with a lot of people. But of course, I want to start with the big question: what the heck is the Unhustle Movement? What are we talking about today?
Well, it means different things to different people. What it means to me is taking time to design your life the way you want to live your life and run a business that supports your lifestyle by focusing on well-being, connecting with your values, having purpose in life, and really living a legendary life and still doing an incredible success with work, which these days looks completely different to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've learned about success is it's personal, right? It is different for everybody. And you talk about connecting to values and really owning your life, which I'm really big on. But why is it called unhustle? Why is this against? I know you're something about fighting against the kind of hustle culture we've gotten used to. What is that all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I hustled a lot in my younger age. I worked 18-hour days. I did burnout right when no one knew what burnout is. It wasn't considered a diagnosis. Whether I was languishing or had full burnout, I can't really tell you. But in my opinion, this whole notion of hustling all the time has a very, very negative connotation in my mind because it's the worst possible advice that can be given to entrepreneurs. And we're still in that mindset that the more you work, the harder you work, the longer you work, the more successful you're going to be. When in reality, all the data and the science and the studies and everything points to the opposite direction, that when you take time off from work, when you take time to recuperate, when you actually do some kind of self-care practices, when you give your mind time to rest, you're more productive, you're more creative, you feel better, you can think clearly, you have better focus. So all these principles I studied under the Human Potential Institute to switch from marketing careers into trying to really optimize my mind and mind body. But in reality, all the principles and practices that I've been following, anything from like mindfulness meditation to like things like flow state and principles behind how to be more creative, all of them point really to it doesn't happen when you're constantly on deadlines, constantly doing. It actually happens when you have a little bit more space for being, which a lot of us entrepreneurs are chasing. Ultimately, at the end of the day, is that freedom and flexibility and autonomy in our work. Yet we become slave to our businesses, and then we end up working 18-hour days. So I'm standing up against that notion that we need to hustle, that whole idea of hustle culture. Yeah. And thankfully, the pandemic did something which I look at as really a silver lining in this whole situation. That was, it allowed us to slow down. It allowed us to reconsider our priorities. It allowed us to open up all these conversations about mental health and redefining success and employee well-being or personal well-being, which prior to that, when I was going on my own journey, I felt quite a bit lonelier. But now it's so amazing to see a lot more people jumping in that conversation and kind of trying to shift our culture of overwork into more of a sustainable, more humane culture.
Yeah, and I've seen that, right? And for many years, people, I would see people using the word busy as kind of a badge of honor, right? Like, how are you? I'm busy. You got all this stuff going on. Like, okay, good. Because the last thing we want is to be seen as lazy or not useful or unproductive, right? So we need to be doing stuff all the time. Now, the interesting thing is you mentioned that the pandemic caused a lot of people maybe to slow down and really kind of take assessment on what's going on in their life or their business. The flip side of that I've seen working a lot in the corporate world is that people are actually working more than ever, right? While people are engaged, they're more engaged and they're more productive. People are getting a lot of things done working from home throughout 2020 with no vacations and the computer right there in the same house. no commute, there was no like kind of end of the workday to kind of transition off, that people were working a lot more. And I don't even know if it was because they felt like, oh, we need to hustle. It's just kind of like, there's so much going on and I need to make sure that I am being productive, adding value so that I don't let go, because there's a lot of fear as well. Have you been seeing that? And like, how do you get people to slow down and stop working so much?
Oh, absolutely, Andy. I mean, you hit it right on the head. So there's a huge amount of fear. And unfortunately, some companies are also using that in a way of like, if you don't put in 55 hours a week, you may let go, you're not going to get promoted. And this is when we talk about how do we collectively change our culture, right? And it starts with leadership, it starts with leaders. So I absolutely see that. I work with people who are in sometimes in that type of situation, and how do you push back and establish boundaries? Sometimes boundaries is not what we put on ourselves, but also what the corporation puts on us, right? In terms of your busyness is a badge of honor. I mean, I just get goosebumps and like the hair on my back stands up when I hear that. How are you? I'm good. I'm busy.
I'm busy. Like, yeah.
What does that even mean? You're good. Right. You're busy. Is that good? So I personally had to change my language around how I do that. So I got pretty deep into positive psychology and the inner voice and mindfulness and how you control the inner voice in your head. How do you rewrite that story, and including how do you deal with that fear from a perspective of course you don't want to lose your job, right? You want to pay your mortgage. That's you want to feed your family, sure. Yeah. But at the same time, there's also competition for talent. And sometimes we get a little too comfortable sitting in a job that we don't like and being scared to make a change. And at the same time, companies are reaching out to me looking for highly qualified people. Now, how do you get to be a highly qualified people and a high performer? Not by working all the time. So, I mean, when all the science points to being able to work in a state of flow or being productive at 4 hours a day, you need to be able to step away. Now, these are things sometimes that we impose on ourselves, sometimes are not imposed on ourselves, but hopefully together, I'm trying to change culture by changing how people push back, and I'm seeing success with that. I'm also talking to leaders and companies who are also trying to make that change. So it's a little bit on both sides. It's not easy, but I was just reading an article that stated there was a study done that working over 55 hours a week has led to 700,000 deaths in a year from heart failure and stroke. So we're looking at like sacrificing our life for work or overwork. Yeah. And on the opposite side, studies show that working more than 36 hours in a week is counterproductive. You're starting to lose productivity. Interesting. So when you take a look at these things and you're going, okay, what's going on here? We're just trapped in an old mentality, right? We're trapped into that mindset that 40 hours is the way to go. And then there's Andrew Barnes with the 4-day work week, which is turning into a phenomenon. A lot of companies, even countries, are going on a 4-day work week. America is a little bit behind on all of this, but we'll hopefully catch up soon because countries in Europe are recognizing it. Japan, there's a word in Japan, karoshi, right? Death by overwork. Even Japan is considering going on a 4-day work week.
That's surprising. They work a lot in Japan too.
They do work a lot, but you know what? The funny thing is, Americans work longer hours than the Japanese. We just don't have a word for death by overwork. Yeah.
So how do you fight this? I mean, this is all ingrained in our culture, right? And whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in the corporate world, but let's go more to the corporate world, because it's one thing to say, yeah, you know what, Milena's right. I need to work a little bit less. I need to walk away and take a break. Maybe I'll work a 4-day work week. But I have a boss and a boss's boss who maybe they've shifted a little bit. I don't have to be in the office, but they expect me to be working and getting a lot of things done. They're putting a lot of things on my plate. And I'm afraid if I go back and say, hey, I'm not going to work this much, that they're going to let me go, or I'm not going to get promoted. I'm not going to be able to move up because I'm ambitious. Like, what do people do? What do you recommend to people in that type of situation?
I mean, a lot of the leaders who believe in that working, look, I personally had to change. If you're a leader and you're working so many hours because you're so connected, and a lot of people love what they do, right? Let's take Elon Musk, for example, right? He says, I work 100 hours and you don't change the world by not putting in 100 hours a week.
I mean, he's like famously sleeping at the Tesla office right under his desk, right? Because he works so much.
Although he's also has come out and recognized that he sleeps minimum 6 hours, and if he doesn't get in his sleep, he notices his productivity drops. Now, here's a guy who's trying to, really change the world. The people who work for him are trying to have a good life, save enough for retirement, send their kids to college, have a vacation, right? So you can't expect to have the same work ethic as Elon Musk. The people working for him are not making the money he's making.
Yeah.
But how do you get to people like Elon Musk? By showing the studies and the data and the research that shows that if you are investing in your employees' well-being and they show up more rested, more energized, more creative, more productive, you win. It's actually, and this is all the studies that, and some of the case studies that Andrew Barnes from the 4-day work week showed, right? That when he put his employees on a 4-day work week, paid them the same amount of hours, his productivity levels went up, stress levels went down, employees were happier. So it's I think when you start looking at the companies that are doing it, you start getting that banister effect, right? When one person does it and all of a sudden he's like, whoa, what's going on over here? Like, people are happier, people are more productive, they don't quit their jobs, they're producing more, they're more engaged. And all of a sudden you're going, why am I not doing it? So look, it's not for everybody, but I think you can experiment and try it. I personally pushed back on my boss with regards to meetings many years ago.
Yeah, tell me your own story. And by the way, for anybody watching live, if you have a question or a comment, feel free to put that in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. But what is your story behind this, Milena? Because you came from the corporate world before you went off on your own, right?
Well, actually, before I came from the corporate world, I came from Bulgaria, which is where the accent's from. So I'm actually a first generation immigrant in America, and I'm very grateful for having come here to pursue the American dream. That American dream for me, I followed the path of marketing career. I have an MBA in international marketing from San Diego. And then I worked for a media company in Lake Tahoe during the .com. I used to explain to people at parties how to spell Google, and it was going to be a great next search engine. So I was like the early adopter of online marketing. Yeah. Then I got a job as a marketing director for a ski resort, which was one of my dreams bucket jobs that I wanted to do. And I did it for 10 years, and I was very happy doing it. And then social media really picked up, and I decided to start my own agency and started my own entrepreneurial journey, which led me to work with some phenomenal clients and celebrities like Madonna and Steve Nash and UFC Jim, and a lot of them were in the health and wellness area. And I loved what I was doing, and I built a team of about 10 people, and I was the one hustling, and I was asking the same of my employees until I had to present to a national conference. I think they were interior designers, on the differences between like Gen X and millennials. I don't think Gen Y was around back then, but I had somebody put the research together, and I looked at the differences between millennials and Gen X, and I said, oh my God, I've had this wrong the whole time. I'm not going to change the way millennials perceive what matters to them. I can either agree with how they want to live their lives and how they want to show up at work. And back then I started to actually allow my employees to work whenever they wanted, because If somebody wants to work at midnight instead of at 9 a.m. in the morning and be more productive at midnight, then why would I stand in the way of them being more productive? So I allow them for a lot more flexibility. We were actually working remotely anyway. But when I was working at the ski resort is actually when I pushed back on my boss on meetings, because I was getting 14, 16 hours of sitting in meetings, of, these management meetings, and I didn't have any time to do the job he hired me to do. So I actually pushed back and I said, look, if you want me to do the job you hired me to do, I need creative time. I need to be able to work alone. So I actually start working from home 1 day a week, just as an experiment. I said, look, get me off like these meetings, let me work at home. That was the year the ski resort actually won a marketing award, and we crushed it in terms of revenues. So
interesting.
You have to start small, you have to baby steps. I mean, don't get fired. Like, don't go to your boss and say, that's it, I'm not working any more than 36 hours.
I'm working 4 days a week, 36 hours. I'm not going to any of your meetings.
Actually, right. 4 hours a day. Milena said I can do it. You gotta have buy-in, and you gotta start small, but also ask, how are we measuring productivity? Because it's not hours. And we all know it. You have some days, you have time that you get so much done in one day. Yeah. And then a week goes by and you're like, what did I accomplish today? Right. And we all want to perform and accomplish and check off to-dos lists, and it feels good. Now, part of the reason a lot of people, you were talking earlier about why people are working longer from home. A big part of that reason is because the alternative to that work is the way most of us look at rest, meaning grab a beer, sit on the couch, watch TV. Your brain doesn't get stimulated the same way as when you're working. So from a perspective of what's happening in your brain, the neuroscience behind it, if you're involved in some really challenging activity, like you and I were talking, that I went about how I wanted to learn to kiteboard. That was a very challenging activity to me, very rewarding, because I was making small progress. I was completely focused, fully in flow. It's the same kind of level of focus and challenge to skill ratios. So it puts you in a state of flow. You're very, and you get a lot of dopamine and all these brain chemicals that you get when you accomplish something really meaningful. But without that, we gravitate towards work because it makes us feel good. So the question is to find things in that way, like hobbies and active rest and deep play. And that's why you hear really successful people going and sailing an ocean or climbing a mountain in their time off, or taking designated time periods to do that, because it's actually invigorating, it's challenging, it's creative, and flow drives more flow. So people get
a lot more fulfillment from growth, from challenges, and from contribution. And we don't get that much fulfillment from sitting around watching TV or sports or whatever it may be. And I wrote about that in my book. Like I made that shift in my 20s. I spent a lot of time watching sports. All my downtime was watching sports and going out drinking with friends. And there's nothing wrong with those things per se, but if you really want to be growing, I think you got to take a look at how you're spending your time and where you're spending your time. And are you being productive with your work hours? And then are you being productive with your other time, or to like grow or, build, find happiness or joy in your life, to learning something like kiteboarding, which I tried once, by the way, is really, really, really difficult.
It's really hard, man. I thought I was going to die. I was like, this is it. I'm going to die. But this was my aha moment. This is when I decided to change my life.
Yeah.
When I was in the middle of the ocean, the Sierra Cortez, getting dragged behind a kite, fighting for my life with everything I got. And then all of a sudden, I had to surrender. I just had to let go. And all of a sudden, everything got really quiet around me. And I was like, there's more to life than working. What am I doing? Why am I killing myself? Like, my parents both died young from a couple of different, health problems. And I was thinking, what am I doing with my life? Like, this isn't right. So kiteboarding is super, super dangerous. I still get on my knees and say a little prayer every time I connect to the kite, and I still do it. But that, in a way, is also dealing with fear, right? We were talking about dealing with fear. Fear is from a mindfulness perspective, the way I've been trained to deal with it is like, there's a whole practice you can do to, locate the fear in your body, and actually, instead of trying to push through it or overcome it, it's more about accepting it and welcoming it, because fear is there to tell us something, right? But we very rarely tune into our bodies and try to figure out what that fear is telling us. Instinctively, we're always gonna be afraid of something. But it's a question of being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And kiting teaches me that. Another thing that I do, which may sound silly, but take a cold shower in the morning. When you're sitting there like with the hot shower and you're trying to turn it to cold, I mean, that's fear, right?
Yep.
But you're not gonna die if you turn it to 5 seconds.
No. But it is hard. I've done that many times, and it's never easy. But it's discomfort, right? And growth happens from getting out of your comfort zone. So let's go back to that hustle culture and help some people. I definitely see the allure and the value of the 4-hour or the 4-day work week. I think there's a lot of people out there, if we're really honest, we're wasting a lot of time on our work days, right? And if we have to constrict it and say, you got to get all your work done in 4 days, and that's going to give you more free time, you're going to probably zone in and get more productive. What are some ways for people to unhustle, as you say, on a day-to-day basis? Especially, let's say, hey, I'm not going to get my boss to completely change the culture. I probably still got to put in at least 40 hours, probably got to work 5 days. But I want to cut back from like the 60 hours to 50 or 40 and have some more free time and feel better about my life and what I'm doing. Like, what do I do? How do I stop hustling so much?
Yeah, sure. First off, I'm not that big of a proponent on the 4-day work week, because I personally, I think you need to do what works for you. I mean, if you're a company that what works for the company, that's great. When I say I'm a big proponent of it, it's just one way of going about it, right? Personally, what works for me is work shorter hours, but work 5 days. But I also have the flexibility, if I decide to do a 4-day work week, that I can do it. Some of the steps that I recommend to people to start with is take back your mornings. And so take 5 to 30 minutes in the morning just for yourself. And I know a lot of parents have a really hard time with that. But basically, if you want to, it's the counterintuitive of like having a slow morning. So I started this Unhustle morning rituals called, like, I use the sunrise method. So S is for sunlight, so getting some sunlight in the morning. U is for starting your day without being unplugged, so without the emails, the messages, just having a little bit of time for your thoughts, for your reflection. N is like spending time in nature. R stands for reading and writing, and there's a lot of like science behind why reading and writing is good for your creativity, cognitive abilities. I is for setting your intentions for the day. So what are the top 3 things you want to accomplish this day, like the most important tasks for the day that will make you feel good at the end of the day. S is for stillness. So that's like your gratitude, mindfulness, meditation practices. And E is for energy. This is like just a little bit of movement, kind of get the body moving, whether that's a quick heat workout, energy, cold shower, bulletproof drink, whatever it is, right? So basically, I'm not saying take these rituals, make them yours, but I'm saying have certain amount of practices that you can choose and choose from each day based on your mind and body energy. But having the morning, so for you, with a little bit of time for you, ideally 30 minutes, but as much as you can, will bring you a little bit of balance and calm and focus for the rest of the day. And another thing that works for me is kind of like, see if you can work in a state of flow, which means eliminating distractions, which means going past the fear of working on the most challenging project that we constantly push back to the end of the day, and then it doesn't get done, and that's why we end up overworking most of the times. So doing the most challenging project first, and then using basic kind of neuroscience tactics to be able to put yourself in a state of flow, like having a designated place to work, even if you have to work at the kitchen table, like putting a tablecloth so that it's, when it's time for play and food and nourishment, and when it's time to work, because otherwise your brain just gets trained into like, oh, this is the place where, we socialize, and then you immediately get into like distractive mode. Doing one thing at a time, obviously. closing all the tabs, eliminating all the distractions from your phone, like turning off notifications. I mean, all these things that we do know. I'm not sharing anything earth-shattering here.
Yeah.
We just don't
And
do
most
it.
people don't film them, right?
We don't do it. Right. So it comes down to the practice. I mean, I've studied with a lot of like monks, teachings, and all of them teach you one thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
How to bring your attention, how to focus, how to bring your attention, how to
They
focus.
don't have a lot of tabs open on their browser.
Some do. Some have gone from, monks to like being entrepreneurs and sharing what they've learned in the monastery. So some do, but it's the same thing over and over. How do you control your mind? And the way do you control the awareness? And the way you control your mind is by controlling your awareness, right? So let's say you feel fear. You're aware that you feel that fear. It's a question of locating it and moving that awareness to now you feel calm. And we can go deeper into some of these practices, but basically the way I look at it is, how do you take care of what's the most important for you to do? What's the most essential for you to do? And what makes you happy and gives you joy at the end of the day? Because, we're not living to work, we're working to live.
Yeah. Right. And work is not life. It is for many people, but nobody gets to the end of their life and says, I wish I would have worked more. Right. It's very rare. You look at the top regrets of the dying and all that sort of stuff. And I love that you mentioned, because there may be certain things we can't change about our job, but there are many things we can change about our life and how we approach life and taking time for self-care. I'm a big fan of the morning routine. I wrote about that in my book. Been following the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod for many years. Since 2016, getting up early and practicing the Miracle Morning meditation.
Yeah, I disagree with the Miracle Morning. Let me tell you why. Yeah, because I'm not a morning person.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not morning people. But so getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning may work for some people, may not work for other people. I believe in knowing your chronotype, which is your gene of when you must awake and when you must sleep, and working with when you're productive, when you must productive based on your chronotype. And there are various tests online that you can take and you can find your chronotype. Sure. Having a morning routine, I stopped waking up with an alarm clock at all, because it doesn't work for me. It's just not that I'm not that kind of person. But I may have, I may do my morning routine at 7 o'clock, not at 5 o'clock. That's what works for me. I think working working with your biology instead of against it is really key. And this is where 9 to 5 doesn't work for everybody, because if you're most creative at 10 o'clock and then all of a sudden your boss constantly schedules meetings at 10 o'clock, you can't get your work done, right?
Right.
And that's why I think leaders also need to get more in tune with, like, what are my employees' chronotypes? This is when, remember earlier I was telling you about the millennials, and some of them are saying, well, I'm the most productive at 11 o'clock at night. That's why I had to let go. That's why I had to say, if that works for you, that works for you, as long as the work is getting done. But then you're not measuring when people are showing up, online, but actually what's getting done.
Right. Then lean into that. Figure out when you are productive. I am more of a morning person, so it works for me.
Right.
You got to think about when this works for you, but also everybody has a different situation. What does your schedule look like? Where can you make the time that maybe you've been resisting it? If you can go to bed earlier, you might be able to become more of a morning person and get up earlier. But at the end of the day, it's really about making time for self-care. Things like meditation, reading, writing, setting intention, having that stillness, getting some exercise, some movement in your day. And I find that when I'm doing all those things, I'm feeling a lot better about my day and my week and my life. And that leads me to the last question I wanted to ask you, because I don't want to go too long here. But there's a drive in our society to achieve success, right? And we started this interview by talking about the idea that success is personal, right? The definition of success. And a lot of people are driving towards success. They want to get that promotion or move up, become CEO or vice president one day, or run a big business, or, whatever it may be. And there's nothing wrong with those, right? But success is different for different people. So how do you talk about that and reframe that definition of success, or what people are really striving for?
I think the best way to go about this is to get really clear on your values.
Mm.
I did a lot of work in that area when I was looking at pivoting my career and what did I really want to do, because Unhustle is obviously something that's deeply, deeply connected with my values and with my purpose in life. And so getting clarity on your values is key. It's interesting that you bring that up, because yesterday I had a busy day, just like everybody. I have a lot of things to do and I have a lot of things to accomplish. And I looked at my dog and I was like, we haven't been for a walk in a long time. So I took her around this lake, walking around the lake in nature, and it's just a constant reminder to myself how good that time off is, because I always come up with really good ideas that would never happen if I'm at my desk. But it was funny because I was just thinking, this is a really successful day. I'm outside in nature in the sunshine with my dog. What could possibly be wrong? And it puts you in such a good mood that you can actually accomplish from work perspective a lot more. So defining success on your own, you and I talked about a little bit about before we hit live. I design my life the way I want to live my life, doing the things I want to do, living in places I want to live. And to me, that's success. If I have a smile on my face every day, at the end of the day, like I feel good of what I accomplish, to me, that's success. Spending time with my husband, with my dog, to me, that's success. Having my health, it's my success. But it's different for everybody, right? I had to let go, and there is a big ego thing in there. And I had to just surrender and let go. And instead of asking, what do I want to get out of life? Say, what does life want to get out of me? And being able to surrender and let go and be a little bit more fluid with that. So it's up for everybody to figure this one out. But success is not necessarily material things, or not necessarily titles, or not even necessarily money.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I love it when people get to really design their life and live the life they want. And people ask me about success. I always think it's living life with no regrets. It's really being happy and satisfied and fulfilled with your life. That's success. It doesn't matter whether you are a CEO with 1,000 people reporting to you, or just doing, your job on your own, or running a little business. You're getting by and you're happy with your life, like that. That's success, right? You get to define it. Last question for you, Milena. My book and this podcast are called Own Your Career, Own Your Life. When you hear that, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think you were describing me.
I wrote it for you.
Thank you. Yeah. I love the title. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what people want right now. There was actually another article I just read, how people's perception of how much money they need to have that financial stability dropped by about $300,000 during the pandemic. So clearly money is not an indicator for what success looks like. But yeah, on your life, on your career, on your life is exactly what we're all trying to achieve, right? Having freedom, having autonomy, having the choice to do what you want to do, wherever you want to live, and do something that makes you happy and brings you joy every day.
Love it. Absolutely. It's about taking ownership, responsibility, designing the life that you love. For those watching live, I think I already dropped your website in the show description. But for those listening later on, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, follow you, where should they go?
Unhustle.com is my website. There's two ways that they can learn right away. There's a stress audit that they can take and see how much stress they're dealing with right now. It's free on my website. And I also put a seven story ebook with people and companies that have been redesigning their life in certain ways with their superpowers. So they can download that on the website as well and see how other people are doing it. Because the more you see that it's doable, the more courage you get to do it yourself. So I didn't want just for me to be the only role model on that website. So I used some other people's stories.
I like it. Yeah. I mean, some people might look at you and say, well, easy for you to say, this is your situation. Well, let's see how other people have done this and share different case studies so that someone can find someone that looks like them, right? Or feels like they're more real to their situation. Well, Milena, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing about the Unhustle movement. I hope some people watching, listening, start to think, I wonder how I can redesign my life, my workday, my schedule, how I work, how I approach work, and maybe stop hustling so much, make some time for me, make some time to be with my family, some self-care time. Remember that all of that stuff is really important. And I've found in my life, and I think you have in yours as well, that when we make that time for self-care, whether it's meditation, stillness, mindfulness, exercise, taking a walk, just, sitting quietly and being in thought often makes me a lot more productive. And it sounds like it does for you as well. So thanks so much for being here, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Andy. I really